The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're coming to you live on this Monday morning, the 9th of June, 2025. So thrilled to be here with you. I'm in my office because we stopped and did some more construction on the studio. So I don't know, we might be back in there tomorrow. Fingers crossed. We're working on it. But anyway, so thrilled to be here with you this morning. Sometimes I just am so grateful as we start the show. I go, oh, this is exciting. We get to talk about some stuff that's really near and dear to me. And I always try to have our guests and our topics be things that I'm hearing from you guys. So love the interaction. If you guys tell us what you're looking for, you're much more likely to find it because I try to absorb what you guys are talking about and go, hey, I think maybe we need to do a show about that. So we're going to be talking about the teen years in just a minute. And I want to say, I did write a book. A couple of years ago, I wrote a book. It took a long time. I started it and then I paused on it and then I finished it. And if you read in the book, when you get to the teen years, it says, listen, I don't think I would listen to me because I'm in the thick of it, right? And when I started writing the book, my son wasn't even a teen. But now I am all the way through the teen years, which is shocking and amazing to me how quickly that went. But also, I've spent another decade asking other people, what did you do that worked? What did you not do? So this is like an addendum to the book. We're going to do a parent to parent about, what are some really essential things that you need to be mindful of when you have a teen. And I want to say this, for those of you who don't have teens and you're like, well, I have a 3-year-old. This doesn't really have anything to do with me. I'll skip this show. I want to say to you that knowing what's coming before it's coming, vital, vital, vital. So I would encourage you to watch anyway and just have it in the back of your head. Oh, because some of these things you actually could start with a 3-year-old, at least be thinking about them, just dating, right? And I also want to say for any of you who have adults that are no longer teens like I do, some of this stuff is also stuff that you can revisit and go, okay, we didn't quite get that the way I wanted when we were teens. So now let's shore that stuff up. I was going to say a different word, but this is a family show. So anyway, we're live right now on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So we hope you guys are tuning in. We love to hear. The chat is open. I love to hear from you. And I know Chris loves to hear from you too. Chris is going to show you on the screen, if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook or any of those places live, some of the different ways that you can interact with us. But then he'll show you, for those of you who are watching later on, different ways that you can connect. Now, we know that most of you are listening in podcasts. That's wonderful. We appreciate that that's the way you like to take in information. So let me just say, for those who haven't found us in podcasts yet, we're available wherever you download podcasts for free, because this is a free download. And that's a very particular thing, right? It's very important to us, even as we are in our, I don't know how the math on that goes. Are we in our 14th year, or we're done with our 14th year and we're starting our 15th year? I can never figure that out. But one of those two things. We've been doing it for a while. Let's say that. So, but from the beginning, the directive that both Dr. Grant Bichet and I had as we were starting this production was that we wanted it to be accessible to anybody who needed it, and around the world. So we hope that if you are looking for information, that you'll find this and say, oh, I can listen to this at 2:00 in the morning, right? And we wanted it to be free to you. But, it's hard because nothing is free. So you will see that we have advertisements that play throughout the podcast, and I hope you embrace those and go, woohoo, that's why it's free to me, and enjoy those sponsors. If that, however, that doesn't jive with your life, there is a way that you can get the podcast with no ads, and you would need to go to, my thing is sending me a message. Okay. I may not actually have the ability to talk to you guys. Oh, I don't know. It's not working. I might need you to send me the messages on my phone, Chris, because my chat is not working. But I am thrilled to tell you about glow.fm/autism live. If you go there, it is a $5 a month charge. And what it does is allows you to get the podcast completely free of ads. It gets downloaded into your inbox. So anything that we do on the Autism Network, whether it's Ask Dr. Doreen, any of those things, you get them. I'm going to try reloading. You get them ad free. Slightly distracted. I'll stop that. Anyway, so that is available to you too, but it is $5 a month. We try to keep that cost super low. We're not trying to make any money off of you, but we want you to be able to get the podcast the way you want to get the podcast. All right. So, why are we talking about the teen years? Because so many of you have been asking me lately, and it's a great time to talk about it because it's summer. And in summer, I want to say that, first of all, I know that for some of you, it feels like, oh, it's going to be this relaxing time. And I don't know, maybe you don't vision this, but I used to think, oh, we're going to be sitting under a pool umbrella somewhere with lemonade. That was sort of the vision I had about summer, and things slow down and it's not so much of a rat race. And I want you to have some portion of that as well. But I also want to say to you, it's catch-up time. Summer is the ideal time. You do have a little bit more time, not a lot, but it's an ideal time. I always think of the tortoise and the hare. And for all the other kids that are in school and doing all kinds of things, right? Maybe they take off part of the summer and it's downtime. But we know what happens with just pure downtime, especially with teenagers. We see regression. And by the way, that is not just our kids on the spectrum. One of the reasons why we have summer school, and the reason why I'm a former school teacher here, when you come back to school in the fall, they're going to spend the first 6 to 10 weeks just reviewing what they taught last year. That whole first section is review. That's for everybody. Not just kids that have special education programs. That's for everybody, because they know that the kids don't retain it over the summer. So what a great time for our kids to catch up, to like move that dial and catch up. And boy, this is really true for teenagers too. And it's true for parents who might feel like, oh, we haven't done enough about this, we haven't done enough about that, right? So let's talk about 11. I gave 11. I always say I'm going to do 10, and then I go, I better put one more in there. Let's talk about 11 things to be absolutely critical things to be doing when your child is a teenager. Okay, so let's launch right into that. Let's start with a disclaimer that teens are individuals. I know some of the stuff that I'm going to say today is just duh, right? But let's never lose sight of the fact that teens are individuals, and we know the saying that when you've met one person on the spectrum, you've met one person on the spectrum, right? But let's say that that's times 24 when they're teens. Teen years are so specific, and everybody's different, and it's a time of finding out who you are in a bigger body with different hormones, right? And it's really a time when personalities start to sprout and become even more evident than they were as children. So I think it's critical whenever talking about helping support our individuals who are on the autism spectrum to not forget that there's a part of normal teenage years that they're also going through, and that it's very individual. There's no one size fits all. There's not even a one size fits most. So everything that we're going to talk about in these 10 tips, you really have to cater it. First of all, you got to say, is this something that's useful to my kiddo, my teen? But also, how would we cater it to where they are? It's a big, beautiful spectrum, the autism spectrum. And, currently the way it is diagnosed is with a set of numbers that, if one being needs support, two needing more support, and 3 needing significant support. And it's across 2 different domains. So your ability to communicate and your, repetitive, restrictive things are different numbers. So imagine that you have somebody who has pretty high verbal skills and can listen very well, having a 1, but they have such extreme anxiety and repetitive motion. So they're a 3 on that. They'd be a 1-3. They're going to be vastly different than somebody who's a 3-1, right? Or somebody who's a 2-2 or a 2-3 or a 1, I don't even know how many combinations there are. I'm not a math wizard, but millions. And then throw in personality and what are they interested in? It's vastly different. So everything that I say from here on in, I want you to take through that filter, that one size does not fit all. So let's go ahead and let's look at what our first tip is. And this is critical, feed their passion. And I know some of you will write in and say, but I don't know what their passion is. That's okay. Then it's like you're going to be throwing darts at a dartboard, right? And seeing what sticks. And that can be a very fun time during the summer, that you'll go to a bookstore, you'll go to a museum, you'll go to a concert, you'll try an art project, you'll maybe have classes with different things, you'll watch different programs, you see what they're interested in. Now, don't get stuck on what they're interested in, because sometimes it will change. Not always. Some of our kids get really passionate about one subject and they're really kind of not flexible on that. If that's the case, we want to get them as flexible as possible, right? I'm going to give the example of if we have a kiddo who's really into Thomas the Tank Engine, which, by the way, let me just say, there's nothing wrong with that. And then suddenly, they become 14, 15 years old and people start to act squeamy about that. Well, listen, I know adults who aren't on the spectrum who are really into Thomas the Tank Engine. There's this funny little thing about when they're teenage that everybody's like, oh, well, but it's like a baby thing. I have concerns about that. I don't think that's an agenda that I'm real cozy with. You know what I mean? I think that we need to take our kids and feed their passion. Now, can we try to expand that passion? Yes. So if your child is really into Thomas the Tank Engine and they're having a Thomas the Tank Engine festival, I encourage you to go to that. But I also encourage you to go and see things, other train museums, and maybe ride a real train and see if you can't expand that passion, but not try to diminish the other passion. I know the ABA people are not necessarily going to agree with me. And I want to speak in their defense that their concern is that kids aren't real nice, and that if your child is trying to socialize, excuse me, pardon me, and they're a teen and all they want to talk about is Thomas the Tank, then sometimes the other kids will shy away from them or, heaven forbid, make fun or bully or whatever. I get it. I hear what the concern is. I just don't agree that it's the priority. There, I said it. People are going to be mad with me. But because here's the thing. I love that once upon a time, one of the doctors said to me, there was a period of time when my son was going through some bullying earlier than I thought that it would occur, right? And from somebody that I did not think it would occur from. And I was very shocked about it. I was like, here's this kid that, we've been really good friends with the family and he's been good friends with Jem, but, we're in second grade and he is saying things to the other kids to make them not like my son. And I was just shocked and dismayed by that. And then a good friend who's a doctor said, here's the thing. Man is the only creature on the planet that will regress for socialization. And I was like, what do you mean? And they were like, well, nobody wants to be the lowest person on the pecking order. So if someone, a second grader, sees that they are the lowest person on the pecking order and that they might be bullied, they will offer up someone and make them the weaker one. And that's regression. That's not a good skill to have. That's regression. And that for most people, this starts like second or third grade and ends by the time they're 18 or 21. But we know that there are people who still have a need to not be the lowest person on the pecking order and that will do that, right? So I think, it's something to be aware of, but to take away something that somebody's really passionate about, I disagree with. If it's because other people are regressing, I just disagree with that. I think there are other ways to get at that. And that feeding that passion and helping that passion to grow, and potentially even having that passion grow into something that's volunteer work or work. I love that. I remember years ago going to a seminar. It was just a one-day thing that was being taught by a television producer about how he got in the business. And I was very curious about that and I wanted to know about that. And he told the story of he was an older gentleman, and television really started when he was a little kid. And he remembered when his parents got their first television and what that was like, and how his parents despaired because every night they would go to bed and he would go to bed, pretend he was asleep, and then wake up and go and watch television until it used to be that television would sign off at like 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's when he would go to bed, and his parents despaired about that. But the truth is, that became his entire life. He was so obsessed with television. It became his life, and he became a TV producer, an Emmy winning TV producer. And, it's just that when he was a kid, like the parents weren't seeing how that was going to work out. So I like to think about that when I think about our kids, that how can we take what their passion is and how can we turn that into a lifelong vocation? Is there a way that we can turn it into either a lifelong hobby or a lifelong passion where they get paid to do it? So feed the passion, my friends, feed the passion. If your child, I think my one regret is that my son, when he was probably 5 or 6, when he was first starting to get his language back, he wanted to shoot a movie. And it was this big Halloween action movie. And he said, I want to shoot it at this friend's house. And his communication wasn't perfect at this point. So it was very hard to understand, but he was like, he wanted a winch for a ghost to fly across the ceiling. And it was a lot. And I remember going, yeah, we're not doing that. And we didn't. I regret it. I regret it. We did other things that were smaller scale, but by the time he was in high school, I realized, I need to be feeding that passion for him to make films. So I was craft services, and I would make my house available for whatever filming. And I wished I had taken that tack earlier on. So I say that to you, whatever it is that your child is wanting to do. I follow in the footsteps of the fabulous Christina Adams, author of A Real Boy, who in the book, she talks about how her son is interested in airplanes. So what does she do? She takes him to the airport and they sit and watch planes take off. And then, well, that wasn't enough. So then they ask if they can meet with a pilot and look around inside their plane. And then it became, flying lessons. And that did not stay his passion, but that helped him to grow as a person. There are all kinds of things that you can do to figure out what the passion is. But again, it's the throwing the spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks. But if you already know what their passion is, if you know that they're into the Titanic, then you go to Las Vegas and tour the Titanic exhibit, right? Because you're going to do something fun anyway, then why not tailor it to their passions? So that's number one. Big thing, and you really want to double down on that. We took our son for welding lessons. He wanted to be an engineer at one point. That is not where he is right now, but he got CNC certified at the age of like 13. It was crazy. So feed the passion. And I put up a picture of robots because a lot of our kids are into robots. And there are robotics programs everywhere. There's a thing called First Robotics, or you can Google Lego robotics, and they start from pre-kindergarten all the way up into college. They have competitions. Chances are that there's already one in your community at one of the schools in your community. Reach out and see if you can find it, because it's amazing for our kids. Okay, so let's move on to number 2. Number two is start the ITP process. So the ITP is the individual transition plan. Your child has an IEP, they are entitled to an ITP. Now, in some states, the ITP has to take place by the 14th birthday. In more states, it's by the 16th birthday. But if you bring this, and this is all done by the school, it gets attached to the IEP, and we'll talk about what the three things are that the ITP covers. But a lot of times, schools just kind of phone this in because I don't think that they really have as much guidance as they should have on this. But let's talk about what it is because it's your legal right now. I don't know how long it will be your legal right, but right now it is your legal right for your child. So the ITP, and by the way, let me be clear about the verbiage here. In most states, it has to be implemented by the 16th birthday. But what you will find is that a lot of schools say, oh, we don't discuss that until the 16th birthday. No, that would be wrong. I would tell you that certainly I would check and see if you're one of the states where it's the 14th birthday. But by the 15th birthday, you need to be planning it so that it can be implemented on the day that they turn 16. So the ITP covers three very different aspects of your child's transition. One of them is where are they going to work? Now, your school will probably, if you bug them about the ITP, they will say, oh, we gave them an evaluation to see what their interests are and what their strengths are. Okay, that's not a bad start, except that for a lot of our kids, that kind of a survey is not going to be that useful. And in any case, it doesn't check the box, and schools sometimes think that it checks the box, but it doesn't. Be bugging the school and say, oh, no, I understand that to be an internship. You have to be helping them to find a job, which means we need an internship. Or you can take it on yourself, but why would you? You've got other things to do with your child, and the school is legally supposed to do this. So push them, excuse me, for an internship and for actual job skills because they're supposed to be helping your child to find a job when they transition out of the school system. We'll talk in a second about when that might be, if it's going to be around their 18th birthday or around their 22nd birthday. We'll get to that. The second thing on the ITP is that it has to address where your child will live after they get out of school. And a lot of times schools go, well, he's probably going to live with you. She's probably going to live with you, right? No, my friends, because that assumes that you are immortal and that you will never, ever die. And as much as we would all like to believe in that, it's not true. So, great time to put the school to work for you to say, and you don't have to do anything, right? If they find you a place for your child to live, you can say no, but don't let them off the hook and have them not look, because maybe there's an ideal situation for your child, or maybe you're going to need it in 8 years, but have them do the homework for you to figure out where your child will live, whether it's independently or with supports, right? And then the third thing is, what will be their support system? And a lot of times schools will assume, well, that's you and your significant other, that's their siblings. Don't let them assume that. Let's work really hard to have the school help to build a community for them and see what they have to offer for that. And it's not a one-off, right? If it's supposed to start on their 16th birthday, most of our kids so weird. Most of our kids either are going to end their program at 18 or they're going to end closer to their 22nd birthday. I'm just checking, Chris. Oh, Parker, you're watching. Hi, Michelle. Hi, Fame. You can contact me by writing to Shannon at autism-live.com. Parker says, unfortunately, kids are cruel. I know someone who watched VeggieTales on the spectrum and was teased endlessly. Yes, and that's kind of that thing that we were talking about. But I would rather that the schools work on that. Like, why are we not making an attempt to teach individuals that that's not a thing to tease anybody for. Why are we not working on that? Now, if somebody's into VeggieTales, then I want to talk about, how do we expand that? Like, are they interested in it because it's things from the Bible? And then we're going to get more creative with that. Is it because it's the vegetables? Like, do they want to be a cook? Do they want to make their own VeggieTale video? Do they want to be the volunteer at Sunday school? Like, what is the part of it that they love? And let's focus on that. But I think, on the very core of it, we want to work to make our children bully proof. And kids will find things to bully about. And I want us to pressure the schools. It's not allowed, it's illegal. And if we make schools aware of it and say these children are bullying this child because he watches VeggieTales, then school has to do something. A lot of times they don't know what to do, but I really encourage you to push for. There are lots of programs. Sometimes there's just a bench at the school that's the buddy bench. And if somebody is sitting on the buddy bench, then other kids are encouraged to go and be on the buddy bench with them. We know that that helps our children to not be bullied, right? And in high schools, they have a lot of peer mentoring programs where they have peers who volunteer to be a part of a group where they are friends with someone who's on the spectrum, and they go on field trips and things like that. If they don't have that at your school where your child is being bullied, ask them to start it. You'll change not only your child's life, but all the children and teens that come later on. Okay, so on to the next one, because we talked about the ITP. Okay, we got to start a conversation about conservatorship. Oh, everybody take a breath, because this is not the most fun time, but I deliberately put a picture of, a rocket taking off, because this is what we want, is we want a successful launch. Sorry, here, I don't know what went wrong there, but thank you. Fabulous. I have a new iPad, you guys. So you can be writing in and I'll be able to see it. Okay, so we want to launch our kids. Thank you, Chris. We want to launch our kids and we want for them to be successful. We don't want them to crash and burn, right? So we have to start having a conversation about conservatorship. And sometimes that conversation is just with ourselves. Sometimes it can be with the individuals themselves. And a lot of times it's a conversation to have with someone who is legally capable of helping you to do a conservatorship. Now, all of our kids don't need to be conserved, and all of our kids don't need to have a complete conservatorship. There are many different levels of conservatorship, everything from being able to be informed when they're having medical things to be a part of the discussion, to having control over the individual's money, having control over and being able to make the decision whether they can marry or not. We all get squeamy when we talk about this, right? Because depending upon the individual, it feels like we're taking rights away from them. I want to say very clearly that the courts are very good about really erring on the side of the individual and making sure that they don't have rights taken away from them that shouldn't be taken away, right? That really it's about what does the individual, it's about protecting, right? And we've all heard the horror stories of things that have happened to individuals who weren't conserved, because they can be prey to people who don't have good intentions, right? It's a very fine line, my friends, but I really feel very confident that if you're working with a lawyer and talking about it, that the courts are going to really make sure that you're not overstepping the needs of what your child, how much they need to be protected, how much they need to be conserved. Now, for some of you, you're going to say to yourselves, well, I don't think that this is necessary. And that's how we got to a point. I will say honestly that when my son was maybe 14 or 15, we were able to sit down with him because his comprehension was such, and we had a conversation. We had just had an example that brought it to the head, that we have a friend and their adult son went missing, and we Jem was with us. We took to the streets to pass out flyers to see if we could find him. And it was very stressful. And when he was found, um, he was taken to the hospital to be checked to see if everything was okay. And it was a very upsetting time for mom because he had not been conserved. Mom was not able to know what was happening. Mom was not able to go into the room to be with him. So he was completely by himself. And this was an individual who needed his mom there. So it made it possible. And my son was very aware of all these circumstances. So we were able to have a conversation about um, here is why his mom wasn't allowed in the room, and here's what his mom would have needed to have done to be allowed in the room, and about how at 18 things change. And and I remember my son saying, "So are you going to do that with me?" And I said, "I don't think so, but here are the things that we need to see from you to see that you are capable of making these decisions for yourself." And I said, for over the next couple of years, we're really going to be looking to see if you make good decisions. And if you do, there will be no need for us to be, on that paperwork as having to make the decisions with you. So it kind of became a motivator for him. And of course, by the time we were 18, there was no question. But for those of you who have kids that you're not sure. And I know a lot of people that it's like it's a fine line. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. It's worthwhile to talk about it with an attorney and see all of the different points, because I guarantee you, if you're on the fence about it, there are going to be a whole lot of things that you're going to immediately say, "Oh, no, of course they can do that on their own." Things like the ability to vote, right? And I'm a big fan of, all of our kids should have the right to vote, and that shouldn't be taken away from them. And the courts will side in that our area too. If you want to take away their right to vote, you got to provide proof of why this is not something that they should be allowed to do. And by the way, that's true of every single one of the things for conservatorship. But I think it's worthwhile to talk to a legal person. If you're on the fence, you want to start to have that conversation at 16. We tell people that you really want to start to get a court date by the time that they're 17, because what you don't want to have happen is that they turn 18 and you have not yet had the court date. Because the truth of the matter is, on that day when they turn 18, they can walk out your door and say bye-bye. They can refuse all of the medical support that you put in place for them, and it's completely legal and you can't do anything about that. So, I think we really have to take into consideration these individuals and ask ourselves why are we asking for this support? If it feels to you that like your child would be overwhelmed being with a doctor by themselves, then that's a reason to consider having that medical ability to be consulted and be in the room. HIPAA will not allow you to be involved if you don't have some form of conservatorship on the medical. Okay, so start the conversation. Start the conversation. It's going to be different for everybody, and but get yourself some legal support so that you know what's possible and what would be advantageous for the individual, not doing more than is necessary. Okay, on to the next one. Number 4 is teaching job skills. And now I've already talked about the fact that the school needs to be doing that, but we're not going to leave it entirely to them, right? Because we're on it, parents. And I put the lemonade there because this can be as simple for those of you who have the younger kids, doing a lemonade stand is a great teaching tool for our kids, right? Because it's planning and it's perspective taking. How much are people going to pay for the lemonade, right? It's learning the steps of, and then there's the cleanup, and did you make any money because you had to pay for the lemonade, and did you charge enough so that you actually made any money? There are so many things that your kiddo can do, and I love having our kiddos be early entrepreneurs because it's a great time with lower risk for them to attempt to do something and sell something and build that mindset of making money. I always evoke the fabulous Joanne Laura, who was the brainchild of Autism Works Now. And she, when I met her, I had this idea that there are some people who just are not going to work in their lives and that that's a kindness, right? And she really sharply disavowed me of that and said, no, that is not a kindness. If you don't have a job, you don't have a seat at the table, and that everybody wants to work. And I saw her reveal this to me and to other parents. And I was also at a time when my son had his first job and got his first paycheck. And he was like, wow, this changes everything. So I encourage you, teach job skills. You know, if Temple Grandin were here, she would say, get them volunteering at a very early age, even before the teen years. Have them, and Temple always said, have them volunteer to walk the neighbor's dog. That's a little scary for me because, you know, should something go wrong, I wouldn't let them do that by themselves, right? Make sure that they know how to walk the dog safely. But there are all kinds of things that kids can do, and you can have them start with you, with chores and things of this nature, and they get paid to do the chores. But then it's really ideal to have them work for somebody else because we have baggage with our kids and our teens, right? And they don't want to do stuff for us. They don't. But sometimes they go, like, I couldn't get my son to wash a dish when he was a teenager, if, you know, beyond if you paid him, right? But he went to work at the Ed Asner Family Center, and I went to pick him up one day, and Nava was like, oh, he did all the dishes. And I was like, who? Who are you talking about? And we had a good laugh about it because, you know, your kids will do things for other people. And he was so thrilled and proud of himself that he washed the dishes at the Ed Asner Center. So, you know, have trade with somebody if you have to, that you'll take their child and put them to work and they'll put your child to work. They'll learn a lot. But job skills are important. They're important to that growing individual. They're important because it translates into money. And as Joanne says, seat at the table. And our community of people that we love that are on the autism spectrum are massively underemployed. That's just the truth. The statistics bear that out. They're massively underemployed. And we don't want to wait until they're 18 or 22 to go, hey, let's go find a job, right? Let's start with job skills beforehand. I am a nut about good customer service. And I also have a child who was constantly, he's all about justice, right? Even as a little kid, if he saw somebody doing something that was wrong, he'd be like, that's wrong, right? So we would always talk about, do you have any authority? You know, do you have the ability to change that if somebody's doing something's wrong? And we would talk that through. And one of the things that he would hear me say, you know, because if I walk up to somebody in a store and I say, hey, do you have mangoes? And if they say no, you know, and then I go find mangoes, heaven help that person. Because I will go back and go, hey, I just wanted you to know you do have mangoes and they're right over here, right? And then I would say to my son, you know, good customer service is if you don't know, you say, I don't know, but let me go find out, right? And we would always start to build that kind of a thing. Just moving through a Tuesday in Costco, right? Just having that experience, we would teach about what our job skills. And if somebody did or said something and it was good customer service, we would point it out. And if somebody did or said something that wasn't good customer service, we would wait till we get in the car and we would have that discussion. That's teaching job skills. It really is. But you can do even more than that, which I encourage you to do because it's empowerment. It's big, big empowerment. Okay. Parker says, honestly, social skills also need to be pushed, especially around relationships. It's coming, Parker. It's like you read my mind. I hear too many horror stories on autism and dating. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. But it's coming, Parker. Okay, so number 5, and again, this is one that's in the ITP, but we're not going to leave it up to the school. We're going to design a supportive community that it can't just be you. I was telling somebody the other day, and this is part of what spurred this conversation, because they were like, what do I need to be doing for my teen? Let me pick your brain. And this was one of the things that I said to them. You know how in a lot of religious families, they have godparents. So, and when someone is baptized, the godparents are chosen, and these are people who are responsible for the spiritual life of the individual should the parents perish. Okay, well, we had the idea because when my son was little, I was terrified that I was going to die and then what was going to happen to my son. Not just then, but his whole life. And I felt like it was a huge responsibility that could not be shared by just one person. I wanted a community for him. So we created godparents for everything that we could think of. That my brother-in-law is a lawyer, and we went to him and said, hey, we'd like for you to be his godparent for legal things so that if he ever needs something legal, and he could be 32, right? But that he could come to you and say, hey, I have a legal question. But he has ABA godparents. He has theater godparents. He has, all kinds of godparents that are people. I think there's a total of 32 of them that he knows if I'm not there and his dad is not there, that he could go to those people and say, hey, what do I do about this? And that, can I tell you, gave me so much peace. And it also, I think, it helped to weave this net around him so that he knows it's not just us, which was a lovely, lovely thing. So I offer that up to you and say, do what you will with that. You don't have to do it exactly that way, but build a community. I always remember being an abnormal psych this is going to sound like a weird thing, but an abnormal psych in college, and they talked about the perfect world theory, which is that if people, and it's sort of the Kitty Genovese thing, because Kitty Genovese was killed in front of a whole bunch of people and nobody did anything. And what research has shown that is if somebody is struggling and no one has been identified as the person to help, then people tend to go, oh, I don't know. Is it me? Should it be me? Whatever. But that if you are in danger, and we taught this to our son as well, if you're in danger or being hurt, that what you need to do is not yell help. You need to point to somebody and say, you help me. And then chances are that person will help you. So by identifying all these people and saying, you're not responsible for his whole life, but you're responsible for this, those people feel responsible and will likely do something should he ever need something. So just trusting that your community will jump in doesn't always work out according to the statistics. Okay, so build that community around them and start as early as possible. All right, now comes a really tough one, making decisions. When your child is a teenager, you have to make final decisions about graduation. So when your child is in school, there are two tracks. There is a diploma track and there is a certificate track. And I, as a teacher, can tell you that these decisions are made by the school way before they ask you to make a decision as a parent, and it makes me itchy. And I try to say to parents all the time, this is what's happening. Just consider for a second that your child goes to kindergarten and they're put into a special day class, and you learn a certain amount of stuff in that special day class, and now you go to first grade and you're still in the special day class and you're learning a certain amount, but maybe you're accelerated on one subject, so now they put you in the they take you out of the special day class for science and you're mainstreamed for science. Okay. But if you have a modified curriculum, you're still not getting the whole curriculum. But by the time you get into ninth grade, there are two clear paths, one for a diploma and one for a certificate. And depending on what state you're in, if you don't start, like I'm just going to call out Texas, they have the TEFs, right? There are certain markers that you have to get, not just pass the class. You have to show excellence with something, or you don't get a graduation credit for that class. And you get further and further behind because you're not being taught the stuff that will get you the diploma. Now, is a diploma everything? No. And for some of our kids, it's just like so not important in the realm of things. I will tell you there's a couple of things that a high school diploma gets you. It gets you the ability to take college classes, right? And a lot of community colleges will not allow you to take a class unless you have that diploma. It gives you the opportunity to do internships, and sometimes that is not a possibility with some organizations if you don't have the high school diploma. But if you see that your child is like, I'm going to talk about a friend who has a child who's a brilliant painter, right? But him knowing how to do math, who cares, right? Or him knowing, who fought in the Battle of 1812, who cares, right? It just isn't important because he's going to be a painter. And he's learning all the things that he needs to do to be a painter, which that includes being able to take a credit card on a Foursquare and put it into the thing and what numbers to put in. But does he need to know how to multiply? Not really. We have calculators for that, right? So sometimes the diploma just isn't important. And I'll tell you what happens if your child is 18 and they get the diploma, they graduate. And guess what? Once the diploma is conferred, the school goes, we're out. Peace out. We're done. Good luck. Hope that ITP did all the things you wanted it to do because we're not on the hook for anything anymore. So, what's the other path? The other path is getting a certificate, which means you completed a program, but you do not get a diploma and you don't get conferred the degree that comes with the diploma. But you did your own thing and you learned what you're going to. No harm, no foul, no shame, as long as you're okay with not having those other perks. And if you're on the certificate track at 18, you don't get conferred out. You have the ability to continue, and schools have programs for our kids from age 18 to their 22nd birthday where they learn job skills. So it really is an individual decision, and you have to decide what you want to do. If I have heard a couple of parents who have worked the system and done both, where they've said our child is not ready with the diploma by the age of 18. So we're going to continue and do the work job skills program. But by the time the child was 18, they either were able to show that they could get a diploma and they graduated at 22, or they were able to pass the, why can I not think what the name of the test is, so that you can get your high school diploma separate from the school system. But don't do that before they're 22 because you will lose the ability to be in that work program. Here's the thing though, you do need to make the decision, or the decision will be made for you, for your child. The school probably has already made the decision and may not have told you. Because if they're not making moves to catch them up to be on the diploma track, that is in and of itself is a decision, right? Okay, so let's move on to the next one, which is foster friendships. Friendships are the key to social interaction. And if we foster friendships, this is that thing that Parker was talking about too. If we teach someone how to be a good friend, then they are already on the track to be a good significant other in a dating situation. Yes, it's important to teach, and I mentioned the Ed Asner Center before, they have classes that are for sex ed classes for kiddos that are between the ages of, I think, 14 and 18. And I think they do those long distance, and I would sign your child up to take that class. I really, 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 really would. But then after the age of 18, they have the dating on the spectrum classes. And if you have somebody who is over the age 18, and they do those remotely now too. So I really want to encourage you to sign your child up for those classes or classes like them. They'll be in a class with other folks on the spectrum of all different ages and abilities. And it's really, really informative, both of them. We can't just leave it to chance. And I always think about Eustacia Cutler, who is Temple Grandin's mom. And she said, so often we infantilize, am I saying that right? Infantilize? I don't know. We think of our kids on the spectrum as not growing up. And that is a great disservice to them because their bodies grow up and their hormones grow up, which means that they have the same sexual and social needs as anybody else. And when we act like that's not happening, we create an environment in which bad stuff can happen, where they can be taken advantage of, or that they could act on some of those feelings, not understanding what the rules are and potentially get into trouble. So we want to be really mindful of educating and supporting them in all of those things. But that starts with friendships. And friendships are hard, they come and go, and your children aren't going to be perfect at them because nobody is. Are you? I'm not, right? But I do think that there's a certain amount of legwork that we as parents have to be willing to do to make the friendships happen. It's uncomfortable. I am the woman who would tell them every week, yes, I'll do play dates. And then I wouldn't because I was nervous and scared and I didn't want him to be rejected and blah, 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 not helping, right? So you have to be willing to arrange play dates, which means you have to play nice with the other parents, which is sometimes the bigger deal, right? You sometimes you have to drive your child a really long way to be at a play date. It's a lot of organizing and fixing and angst, and it doesn't always go right. And you gotta thicken your skin and say this is a priority. Working on friendships, it's the first piece, right? But then I think taking those classes or classes like those, because what ultimately do we want for these young people? Don't we want them to be happy? And isn't a big part of happiness having friends that you enjoy or having a significant other that really, really gets you? So we need to prioritize this at teens. There is a kind of a window in the teen years where it's expected that things won't all go right, right? And it's okay if they're working to learn, where it's so much harder if we start on that when they're adults. So I really want to encourage you, let's really prioritize the friendships. By the way, that will help with a whole bunch of other things that we'll get to in a second. Let's go on to the next one because I know we're getting out of time. Okay, foster leisure skills. I think this is the great unforgotten, land for our teenagers. That a lot of times, look, we already said feed their passion, right? But so often I have a parent who will write in and say, my teen doesn't want to do anything. They're a slug. They want to sit at home and they want to, the one mom who used to write in and say she wants to sit on a stool with a coffee cup with a spoon, and that's all she wants to do all day long. Well, okay, but there's something comforting for her about that. And we want to slowly expand that so that she wants to sit on a stool and drink coffee with a spoon, and she wants to do X, Y, and Z. And then it will be three things, but we need to build leisure skills. If we don't help them to know, here's something fun you can do to relax, here's something fun that you can do as a hobby. If we don't teach them those things, they may not find them. It may not be part of them to be curious about that. And how much will they lose out on if we don't do that? So it means maybe scheduling one thing a day during the summer and saying, we have to go out today and we have to go to the library. We just have to go to the library. And while we're at the library, I need you to find three books that you want to check out and let them pick, right? And it doesn't have to, you don't have to be at the library for 8 hours, right? Maybe it's that you go and you're there for 15 minutes and you go home with the three books, right? But that's something. Maybe another day it's that, you're going to go and have a self-care day where, that might mean getting mani-pedis, or, it might mean, meeting friends and going to a pool, but teaching this is what we do when we relax. Can I tell you that my mom was in motion constantly? My mom was constantly doing something. So for me, I feel like if I'm just sitting and doing nothing, I feel guilt, right? Right. And I had to learn as an adult that I require some downtime. But downtime isn't just staring at the wall, right? How do I like to enjoy my downtime? And if we can teach those skills to our teens or even earlier than teens, it's going to help with anxiety, which we're going to talk about in a second. So let's continue on to the next one. Encourage exercise. Okay. Well, for some of our kids, this is going to feel like torture, and we don't ever want to torture anybody. So think about, what do they like sensory wise? That for a lot of our kids, they love the pool and they love to be in the water. And I just can't emphasize enough how critical it is to give them something that is exercise. We've heard from so many experts that, and it doesn't have to be, they don't have to run a marathon, but that a burst of exercise can help regulate the nervous system and make it so that self awareness and self regulation is so much easier. But if we don't actively make this a part of the teen years, it's so much harder to get after this in the adult years. So much harder. Listen, I'm not good at this for myself, and it's terrible. It's just, absolutely terrible. But I remember during COVID that, there was a week where we were all in my household feeling rough. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be okay. I don't know if I don't know if my husband's going to be okay. I don't know. And we bought a treadmill because it was the only thing that I could think of while basically being on house arrest that we could do that could move that dial. And oh my gosh, it was life changing. And we, just recently we moved it out of the front living room. Like, you would walk in my house and there would be a treadmill right by the door. Right? We just recently moved it. And I'm kind of mad at myself that we moved it, because it's totally accessible, but nobody's using it now. And when it was in the living room, we would be watching a program and everybody would take a turn on the treadmill and we all felt better. All of us felt better. Now, we all exercised in a different way. I walked a little bit longer, but on a slower pace. And my husband did his thing, and my son would get on and he would run, and he felt better. And because of that, we signed him up, and he had regular appointments during the pandemic with Zeus Fitness. Um, and I'm sad to say that we stopped that when he went to college, and I wish we'd continued it, right? He did a lot of walking around campus, and so that sort of filled the bill. But I think making regular exercise a part of your child's life and your teen's life, critical. Critical, critical, critical. So find the way. And I want to say this too: if it can be something that crosses the midline, oh, so much better. Like, boxing is an incredible thing for our kids because it crosses the midline, and we know that that helps with cognition. There's tons of research on that. All right, I got to go on to the next one because we're running low on time. Okay, so number 10, and I think this is the big winner for everything, is that in the teen years, we have to deal with the anxiety. And dealing with the anxiety doesn't mean that we go, oh, hopefully they'll grow out of it. That is dangerous. We need to make sure that they have a whole bunch of skills to work on dealing with the anxiety. For a lot of our kids, that's going to mean having a professional involved to deal with the anxiety. For some of our kids, it might mean medication, and we don't need to, we don't always need to do medication, but for a lot of people, medication is key to getting to feel better. For other kids, it's going to be cognitive behavioral therapy. For some kids, it's going to be dietary intervention and exercise to help work the feelings out. But we can't take the attitude of it's going to go away. Recipe for disaster, right? We need to be mindful and watching and changing the dial. And sometimes if we see anxiety spikes, we need to put less demands, which doesn't mean we let them get away with murder, by the way, but that we're not asking them to climb Everest when they're having anxiety. But in addition to that, we have to give skills. I watched the third season of Georgia and Ginny, or Ginny and Georgia, I guess it, and it deals with a lot of teens having a lot of anxiety and dealing with them in a lot of different ways. If you need, and these are folks that aren't on the spectrum, but it's very prevalent. And it's kind of a good example of all the ways not to do it and all the ways to do it. But please don't bury your head in the sand, deal with the anxiety. And then, of course, the 11th one, which sort of is everything that we've talked about, but I don't want to leave it unsaid, which is it's really key time to build self-esteem. And we build self-esteem in lots of different ways, by us praising things, by us feeding into their passions, by us driving them to the play date or driving them to wherever the thing is that they want to go see, the thing that they're passionate about, by telling them that they're doing a good job, by acknowledging that they are different and that different is fabulous. I think that's an important thing that needs to be said. You don't have to say different, you can say you're unique. There's no one like you in the world, and I wouldn't have you any other way. You're amazing, you wonderful, unique person, you. But build them up. It won't be enough. Can I just tell you, it will not be enough. That they will also need to hear that from peers and from other people besides you. And that's devastating to realize, oh, my opinion can't be enough, right? So put them with people who are talking them up, and get them away from people who are not talking them up. My son has one friend that has the funniest sense of humor, but it's always negative. And he's always, and I pulled him aside when they were 18, and I said, hey, I notice you do this. I wish you wouldn't. That's not what he needs. And I watched this young man decide, okay, I'm gonna deal with this differently, because I'm a good friend, right? So, have them be surrounded by people. Hi, Rodney. Have them be surrounded by people who make them feel good about themselves. Talk to them about that. That's good friendship. And that friends who try to hurt us are not friends. They have quotes around their names. They are not friends. So build that self-esteem. If you do these things on a regular basis, then when you fill in with all the individual things that this person needs, I think you're off to a good start for a happy teen who grows up into a self-actualized adult, that with the right supports leads the happy life that they are destined to lead. That's my opinion. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it, because I've seen that for my son, but I've also seen it for other people's kids too. That the path is windy, and you have to be willing to adapt with them and support them where they are today. It's hard because they're changing every day, but the teen years don't have to be miserable. If we're working and helping and supporting really what their passions are, it doesn't have to be miserable. All right, that's all I have to say on that. We've got a great show tomorrow with Dr. Doreen Granby-Shea for Ask Dr. Doreen. So we hope that you guys will tune in. And, this weekend is the Ed Asner Poker Tournament. So we're going to be on the red carpet again, and we're going to be asking the celebrities all kinds of questions. We are not going to be live on the carpet. We've stopped doing that. It's just so stressful. So we'll be recording the interviews, and then you'll get to see them later on. We might go, briefly live on my phone, just so that you guys can see what's happening. But that's, what's happening later on this week. So, my friends, thank you for being with me. I hope you got something that is useful to you. Please feel free to write me at shannon@autism-live.com. We'll see you tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.